I took my late wife's disposable camera to be developed, just to see her beautiful face one last time. But the photographer did not give me memories. Instead, he gave me a warning. He locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and handed me the photos with shaking hands. "Do not go home, Henry," he whispered, his voice trembling with genuine fear. "If you go home tonight, you are a dead man." I looked at the first photo, and my blood ran cold. It was not a picture of a birthday party or a sunset. It was evidence of a murder in my own kitchen. Before I tell you what was on that film and how I made them pay, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Your support helps me expose the truth and maybe save someone else from the same fate. The bell above the door at Benny's darkroom jingled as I stepped inside, shaking the Chicago snow off my coat. The shop smelled of fixing chemicals and old dust, a scent that usually brought me comfort. I had been coming here since 1985. Benny was a strange guy, a recluse who preferred the company of negatives to real people, but he was the best technician in the city. I placed the yellow Kodak disposable camera on the glass counter. "I found this in Liz's knitting basket," I said, my voice raspy from weeks of silence. "I think she took it right before she passed. I would like them developed on matte paper." Benny took the camera without making eye contact. He looked pale, darker circles than usual under his eyes. "Come back in an hour," he mumbled. I went to the diner next door and stared at a cup of black coffee for 60 minutes. I was 78 years old, and for the last month since Elizabeth's funeral, I had been existing rather than living. Every corner of our Victorian house in the suburbs screamed of her absence. My son Jason and his wife Megan had moved in to help me, or so they said. They told everyone I was losing my grip on reality, that grief had scrambled my brain. I had almost started to believe them until today. When I returned to the photo shop, the lights were dimmed. Benny was waiting for me by the door. As soon as I stepped in, he turned the lock and pulled the blinds down. "What is going on, Benny?" I asked my investigator. Instincts flaring up for the first time in years. "You need to see this," he said, sliding a thick envelope across the counter. He didn't open it. He just backed away, as if the envelope contained anthrax. I opened the flap and pulled out the stack of 4x6 prints. The first few were standard. Liz's garden, the cat sleeping on the porch. Then the angle changed. The photos became grainy, low-angle shots clearly taken from inside the china cabinet in the dining room. Liz must have hidden the camera behind the crystal glasses. The first photo showed my son, Jason. He was standing at the kitchen counter, his back to the room, but the mirror on the wall caught his reflection. He was holding Liz's heart medication bottles. In one hand, he had her prescribed pills. In the other, he held a plastic bag filled with blue capsules. He was swapping them. I brought the photo closer to my eyes. I spent 40 years as an insurance fraud investigator. I knew how to look at details others missed. The blue pills were distinct. Even in the grain, I could see the shape. That wasn't heart medication. That looked like high-dose muscle relaxants or sedatives. I shuffled to the next photo. My breath hitched. It was Megan, my daughter-in-law, the registered nurse. She was smiling that sweet, sickeningly fake smile she used whenever the neighbors were around. She was holding a glass of water to Liz's lips. Liz looked terrified. Her eyes were wide, pleading. Her hands were pushing the glass away, but Megan's grip on her wrist was tight. I could see the indentation of Megan's fingers on my wife's frail skin. It wasn't care. It was force. The third photo was the one that broke something inside me. It was just a piece of paper, a napkin held up to the lens by a trembling hand. It was Liz's handwriting scrawled in panic. "Hank, don't trust them. Watch the tea. They are changing my meds. I love you." The date stamp on the photo was 2 days before she died. 2 days before she supposedly had a massive heart attack in her sleep. I dropped the photos onto the glass counter. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet shop. My knees felt weak, but I didn't fall. I couldn't fall. Benny whispered from the corner. I saw the date, Henry. I saw the faces. I know that isn't right. You need to go to the police station right now. Do not go back to that house. But I wasn't listening to Benny. I was rewinding the last month in my head. The night she died, Jason had been the one to find her. He had come running into my room, tears streaming down his face, screaming that Mom wouldn't wake up. I remembered how quickly Megan had taken charge, calling the doctor a friend of hers instead of 911 immediately. They said it was peaceful. They said her heart just gave out. They lied. My grief, which had been a heavy, suffocating blanket for weeks, suddenly evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard rage began to form. It started in my stomach and spread to my fingertips. They didn't just let her die. They killed her. My son, my own flesh and blood, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I bailed out of debt 3 times, and the woman he married. They murdered Elizabeth. And for what? The life insurance, the house. I looked at the photo of Jason again. I pulled a magnifying glass from my pocket, a habit from my working days I never dropped. I focused on the blue pills in the bag. There was a faint imprint code visible on one that had spilled on the counter in the picture. NDC 0128, diazepam, 10 milligrams. Combined with Liz's heart condition and her beta blockers, that dosage wouldn't just put her to sleep. It would stop her heart within hours. It was a chemical execution. Benny reached for the phone. "I am calling Detective Miller," he said. I slammed my hand down on the receiver, stopping him. "No," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "No police, not yet." Benny looked at me like I was insane. "Henry, look at the photos. They killed her. If you go back there, they will kill you too. Look at the note. Watch the tea. They are poisoning you too." "I know," I said, straightening my back. The old man posture was gone. The grieving widower was gone. Hank Mitchell, the man who brought down the largest insurance crime ring in Chicago in '92, was back. If I go to the police now, what do I have? A few grainy photos and a handwritten note from a woman who was known to be confused in her final days. Megan is a nurse. She will say Liz was having an episode refusing her meds, and she was trying to help her. Jason will say he was organizing the pills, not swapping them. A good lawyer will tear this evidence apart in 5 minutes. They will walk free. They will inherit my money. They will live in my house. Benny stared at me. "So what are you going to do?" "I am going to get more," I said. I picked up the photos and shoved them inside the lining of my heavy wool coat. I needed undeniable proof. I needed audio. I needed a confession. I needed to catch them in the act. Benny grabbed my arm. "Henry, listen to me. You are 78 years old. You are not a cop anymore. Jason is young. He's desperate. I heard him talking on the phone outside while you were at the diner. He was yelling about money. He owes people. Dangerous people. If he thinks you know, he won't hesitate." "That is exactly what I am counting on," I replied. I pulled my arm free. "They think I am a senile old man. They think I am broken. They think I am the next victim." I walked to the door and unlocked it. The cold wind rushed in, freezing the tears that I hadn't realized were on my cheeks. I turned back to Benny one last time. "If I am not back here in 3 days, send copies of these to the district attorney. But give me 3 days." Benny nodded, terrified. "You are walking into a grave, Henry." I put on my hat and stepped out into the gray afternoon. "No, Benny," I said to the empty street. "I am walking into a crime scene, and I am the only witness who matters." I got into my old Buick and started the engine. My hands were steady on the wheel. I drove toward the suburbs, toward the house that was no longer a home. As I drove, I thought about the tea. Every night for the last week, Megan had been bringing me a special herbal tea. She said it was to help me sleep, to help with the stress. And every morning I woke up groggy, confused, my memory foggy. It wasn't grief. It was sedation. They were already doing it to me. They were priming me for a fall down the stairs or a quiet heart attack in my sleep. I pulled into the driveway. Jason's car was there. The lights were on in the living room. I could see their silhouettes moving behind the curtains. I touched the lump in my coat where the photos were hidden. I took a deep breath. The mask goes on now. I let my shoulders slump. I relaxed my face into a confused, tired expression. I shuffled my feet as I walked up the path. The heavy oak door creaked as I pushed it open, a sound that used to welcome me home but now felt like the lid of a coffin closing. I stepped into the foyer, my hand instinctively clutching the lapel of my wool coat, where the evidence of their betrayal burned against my chest. The house was warm, too warm, stiflingly hot compared to the biting Chicago wind outside. I expected silence. I expected them to be sitting in front of the television or perhaps pretending to read in the study. Instead, I walked into chaos. The living room looked like a storm had passed through it. The contents of the antique mahogany secretary desk, the one Elizabeth had used for her correspondence for 40 years, were strewn across the Persian rug. Papers, envelopes, and old checkbooks created a sea of white on the crimson wool. Jason and Megan were in the center of it all. Jason was on his knees, frantically flipping through a stack of files, his hair disheveled and his tie loosened. Megan was standing by the bookshelf, pulling out volumes of encyclopedias and shaking them as if she expected money to fall out. They froze the moment they saw me. For a second, just a split second, I saw the raw panic in their eyes. It was the look of criminals caught in the beam of a flashlight, the look I had seen on 100 guilty faces during my career. Then the mask slipped back into place. Jason scrambled to his feet, kicking a pile of papers under the sofa with a clumsy motion. "Dad!" Jason breathed out, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "You scared us." We did not hear the car pull up. He walked toward me, his steps quick and purposeful. He was closing the distance too fast. We were just doing some cleaning, organizing. You know how Mom liked to hoard papers. We thought it would be better to clear this junk out so you do not have to deal with it. I stood my ground, playing the part of the confused old man. I blinked slowly, letting my mouth hang open slightly. Cleaning, I asked, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. But Elizabeth needs those papers. She was writing a letter to her sister. Jason stopped just a foot away from me. His eyes darted to my coat, specifically to the bulge on the left side where the photos were hidden. The coat was heavy, bulky, and I was sweating, but I dared not take it off. "Mom is gone, Dad," he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone people use with toddlers and the senile. "Remember, we talked about this. She is not writing letters anymore. You are confused again. Here, let me take your coat. You must be burning up." He reached out his hands, grasping for my lapels. Panic flared in my chest. If he took the coat, he would feel the stack of photos. He would see the edge of the envelope. He would know I had been to Benny's. And if he knew that I would not live to see the sunrise. "No," I said, stepping back. "I am cold. The wind goes right through my bones these days." Jason did not listen. He was aggressive, his desperation making him sloppy. "Come on, Dad, do not be stubborn. Give me the coat." He grabbed the shoulder of my coat and pulled. He was strong, much stronger than me. I felt the photos shifting in the lining. I had to make a choice. If I fought him with strength, he would overpower me. If I fought him with wit, I might just survive. I let my legs go limp. I did not just fall. I collapsed. I threw my weight to the left away from his grip and crumpled onto the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. It hurt. My hip slammed against the floorboard, sending a jolt of pain up my spine that I did not have to fake, but I made sure to curl inward, wrapping my arms around my chest, pinning the coat and the evidence beneath me. "Dad!" Jason shouted, but there was more annoyance than concern in his voice. He hovered over me, unsure whether to pick me up or check my pockets. I groaned, squeezing my eyes shut. My hip, I moaned, letting a tremor run through my voice. I think I broke something. Help me up, son. Just help me to the chair. Do not take my coat. I am freezing. I am so cold. Jason sighed loudly, running a hand through his hair. He looked at Megan, who had abandoned her search of the bookshelf and was watching us with cold, calculating eyes. He is getting worse, Jason muttered to her, not even bothering to whisper. He can barely stand up. Megan walked over her heels, clicking rhythmically on the wood. Leave the coat on him if he wants it, Jason. We do not want him going into shock. Let's just get him to the armchair. They grabbed me by the arms, hoisting me up with less gentleness than one would use for a sack of potatoes. They dragged me to the high-backed velvet armchair by the fireplace and dropped me into it. I kept my arms crossed tight over my chest, huddled inside the wool, looking for all the world like a frail, frightened old man. I will go make some tea, Megan said, smoothing her skirt. Her voice was like syrup, sweet but thick and cloying. Some of that herbal blend Dr. Evans recommended. It will help calm your nerves, Hank. You look like you have seen a ghost. I watched her walk into the kitchen. I knew exactly what she was doing. I had seen the photos. I knew she was the one who mixed the cocktails of drugs that stopped my wife's heart, and now she was brewing something for me. I looked at Jason. He had gone back to the desk, shoving papers into a black garbage bag. Why are you throwing away her checkbooks? I asked, keeping my voice weak. Jason didn't look up. They are old, Dad. Expired. We are just helping you manage the estate. You have enough to worry about without drowning in paperwork. Just relax, wait for your tea. 5 minutes later, Megan returned. She carried a silver tray with a single porcelain cup on it. The steam rose in curling ribbons, carrying a scent that hit my nostrils before she even reached the table. Chamomile, peppermint, and something else. Something underneath the herbs. A sweet metallic scent. Bitter almonds. My heart hammered against my ribs. In my 20 years in fraud investigation, I had worked cases involving suspicious deaths. I had read the toxicology reports. I knew that scent. It wasn't always cyanide like in the movies. Sometimes it was a concentrated sedative, a liquid tranquilizer, that had that distinct chemical sweetness. Whatever it wasn't tea. Here you go, Hank, Megan said, placing the cup on the small table beside me. Drink it while it is hot. It will help you sleep. You need a long, deep sleep. I looked at the cup. The liquid was dark, darker than chamomile should be. I looked at Megan. She was standing over me, waiting. She wasn't going to leave until I drank it. Jason had stopped packing the papers and was watching too. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with their anticipation. If I refused, they would force me. Or worse, they would realize I suspected them. I needed to neutralize the threat without drinking the poison. I reached out with a trembling hand. Thank you, dear, I said. You take such good care of me. I lifted the saucer. The cup rattled against the china. I brought it halfway to my lips, watching their eyes follow the movement. They were fixated on it like wolves watching a trap snap shut. I took a breath, pretending to prepare for a sip, and then I let my hand spasm. It was a violent jerking motion. The cup flew from the saucer. The hot, dark liquid splashed outward, not onto the floor, but directly onto Megan. She shrieked, jumping back as the hot tea soaked into her white blouse and expensive gray skirt. You clumsy old fool, she screamed, the facade of the caring nurse shattering instantly. Her face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. Look what you did, this is silk. I shrank back into the chair, clutching my coat. I am sorry, I stammered. My hand, it just slipped. I am so sorry, Megan. Megan was not listening. She was frantically brushing the hot liquid off her clothes, cursing under her breath. Jason rushed over to her. Are you okay? Did it burn you? It is fine, get a towel, she snapped at him. She began to unbutton her cuffs to roll up her sleeves, trying to keep the wet fabric away from her skin. And that was when I saw it. As she rolled up the left sleeve of her blouse, the light from the chandelier caught the flash of metal on her wrist. It was not her usual Apple Watch. It was a heavy platinum timepiece with a diamond bezel and a mother-of-pearl face. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that watch. I knew every scratch on the clasp. I knew the inscription on the back that read, "To my Lizzie forever, 1985. I had bought that Rolex for Elizabeth for our 25th anniversary. It was her most prized possession. On her deathbed, barely able to speak, Elizabeth had made me promise to bury her with it. She wanted to take it with her. At the funeral, the casket was open. I remembered seeing the watch on her wrist. I remembered kissing her cold hand right next to that platinum band. But the funeral director had closed the casket for the burial. Megan had been the last one near the body. She had insisted on a moment alone to say goodbye to Mom. She had stolen it. She had stolen the watch off a corpse. My wife's corpse. A coldness washed over me that had nothing to do with the winter wind. It was the absolute zero of hatred. They had not just murdered Elizabeth. They had desecrated her. They had stripped her of her dignity and her treasures before the earth even covered her coffin. Megan looked up, catching my stare. She saw me looking at the watch. For a second, she looked confused, and then she realized. She quickly yanked her sleeve down, covering the platinum band, but it was too late. The image was burned into my retinas. "What are you staring at?" She spat, her voice defensive, sharp. I lowered my eyes to the floor, hiding the murderous rage that I knew must be visible in my pupils. "Nothing," I whispered, letting my voice crack. "Just looking at the stain. I am so sorry about your blouse." Megan huffed, turning on her heel. "I am going to change. Jason, make sure he does not move. And clean up this mess." She stomped out of the room. I sat there in the armchair, listening to Jason curse as he went to the kitchen for paper towels. I pulled my coat tighter around me. The tea was soaking into the rug, the smell of almonds filling the air. I did not need to test it to know it was poison. Just like I did not need a jury to tell me they were guilty. Seeing that watch on her wrist was the final verdict. I waited until Jason was on his hands and knees scrubbing the rug. I looked at the back of his neck, exposed and vulnerable. I could have ended it there. I could have picked up the heavy brass fireplace poker and finished him. But that was too easy. That was too quick. No. I touched the hidden pocket in my coat again. I was going to destroy them completely. I was going to take their freedom, their reputation, and their future. I was going to play the long game. I was going to be the helpless, senile old man they wanted me to be, right up until the moment I tightened the noose around their necks. Jason stood up, throwing the wet paper towels into the trash bag. "You are going to bed, Dad," he said, his voice hard. "No more tea, no more talking, just bed. And I am locking the door from the outside so you do not go wandering again." I nodded obediently. "Okay, son, whatever you say." He didn't know it, but he wasn't locking me in. He was locking himself in the cage with the lion. And the lion was just waking up. The lock clicked with a finality that echoed in the silent hallway. I stood on the other side of the door, staring at the brass knob that was now a barrier between me and the rest of my life. Jason had turned the key from the outside, sealing me in my bedroom like a disobedient child or a dangerous prisoner. I waited until I heard his heavy footsteps retreat down the hall and the distinct slam of his own bedroom door before I moved. My body ached from the fake fall earlier, a dull throb in my hip reminding me that I was 78 years old, not 30. But adrenaline is a powerful drug, and right now it was coursing through my veins, sharpening my senses and masking the pain. I walked to the ensuite bathroom and turned on the faucet, letting the water run loud enough to mask any small noises I might make. I pulled the bottle of sleeping pills Megan had left on the nightstand out of my pocket. 2 little blue pills. "To help you sleep, Dad." I looked at them with disgust. I did not need a lab to tell me these were not over-the-counter sleep aids. I tossed them into the toilet bowl and watched them swirl away into the dark piping. I was not going to sleep. Not tonight. Tonight was for listening. I went to the back of my closet, pushing aside the rows of suits I hadn't worn since the funeral. On the top shelf, buried under a stack of old wool blankets, was a leather shoebox. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for it, not from age but from the weight of the memories it held. Inside was the debris of a past life. A badge I had turned in 20 years ago, a pair of handcuffs, and a Litman cardiology stethoscope, the rubber tubing slightly stiff with age but the diaphragm still cold and sensitive. I had used this tool to listen to safe tumblers and verify heartbeats in insurance exams, but tonight it had a different purpose. I turned off the bathroom water and crept back into the bedroom. The house was settling, groaning in the winter wind, but I knew the layout of these walls better than the lines on my own palms. Jason's room shared a wall with mine, specifically the wall where my dresser stood. I moved the heavy oak furniture inch by inch, wincing at the scraping sound it made against the floorboards, praying the wind was loud enough to cover it. When I had enough space, I squeezed behind it. The plaster here was thin. It was original to the house horsehair and lath, excellent for acoustics, if you knew where to listen. I placed the earpieces in my ears and pressed the cold metal disc against the wall. At first, there was only the static hiss of silence. Then a voice cut through. It was muffled, but distinguishable. Jason. He was pacing. I could hear the rhythm of his footsteps back and forth, back and forth. Then the sound of a voice raised in anger. He was on the phone. "I told you I need more time," Jason hissed. His voice was tight, vibrating with a panic I had never heard before. "No, you listen to me. The old man is still kicking. I cannot just make him sign it if he is dead. Can I?" I pressed the stethoscope harder against the wall, my knuckles turning white. He wasn't talking to a bank. You don't talk to a loan officer like that. 500 grand, Jason shouted, then immediately lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "I know I owe you 500. I know the interest is ticking. But the house is worth 3 times that. I just need his signature on the deed transfer. Once the house is in my name, I can get the second mortgage and pay you out in cash." My heart hammered against my ribs so loud, I was afraid it would drown out the conversation. $500,000. My son had not just made a few bad investments. He had gambled away a fortune. He was in deep with loan sharks. That explained everything. The rush to move in, the sudden interest in my health, the desperation. "Tuesday," Jason said, his voice cracking. "Tuesday is the deadline." "I know." "Yes, I promise. If I do not have the money by Tuesday, you can come for me. But I will have it. He is declining fast. I have it under control." He hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than before. I pulled the stethoscope from my ears and let it hang around my neck. Tuesday. Today was Saturday. I had 3 days. 3 days before my son traded my life for his gambling debts. He had already forged my signature to leverage the property, but he needed me to officially transfer the deed to legitimize the theft before the sharks came for his knees. And once that paper was signed, my heart would mysteriously stop, just like Elizabeth's. I could not stay in this room. I needed hard evidence. The audio through the wall was good for my knowledge, but it wouldn't hold up in court. I needed the gear I had stashed away for a worst-case scenario I never thought would actually happen. The door was locked from the outside. A simple privacy lock easily defeated if you had the right tool. I didn't have my lockpicks, but I had something else. I went to the window and unhooked the stiff metal wire that held the sheer curtains in place. It was a thin, rigid rod. I bent the tip into a small hook using the edge of the radiator. I walked to the door, knelt down, and slid the wire into the keyhole. It took me 2 tries. My hands were sweating. I felt the tumblers shift, a soft click, and the knob turned. I opened the door a fraction of an inch. The hallway was pitch black. I slipped out my socks, sliding silently on the hardwood. I was a ghost in my own home. Every shadow looked like a threat. I moved toward the stairs, skipping the fourth step, because I knew it groaned under weight. I held my breath as I passed Jason's door. A sliver of light showed underneath. He was still awake. I made it to the kitchen, and then to the heavy door that led to the basement. I opened it slowly, thankful that I had oiled these hinges myself just last year. The air from the basement was cool and smelled of damp earth and wine corks. I descended into the darkness, not daring to turn on the light. I knew the way by touch. Past the furnace, past the stacks of holiday decorations to the wine cellar at the far end. This was my sanctuary. Rows of dusty Cabernet and Merlot bottles lined the walls. I walked to the rack on the north wall, the one holding the cheap vintage from '98. I reached behind the third bottle on the second row and found the small latch. I pulled. The entire section of the rack swung forward on silent hinges, revealing a small wall safe embedded in the concrete foundation. I spun the dial, right to 19, left to 45, right to 70. The date I met Elizabeth. The mechanism clunked a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet basement. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside, resting on a velvet pad, was my old field kit. It was outdated technology by modern standards, but it was reliable. A Sony micro-cassette recorder, the kind that could pick up a whisper from across a room. A button camera wired to a battery pack the size of a cigarette deck, and a spare set of house keys. I checked the battery on the recorder. The little red light flickered to life. Good. I slipped the device into my pajama pocket. I took the button camera and began to thread the wire through the buttonhole of my pajama top, taping the battery pack to my chest with the duct tape I kept in the tool bench. It was uncomfortable, but it was a shield. From this moment on, everything they said, everything they did would be recorded. I closed the safe and pushed the wine rack back into place. I felt a surge of triumph. I was not helpless. I was armed. I turned to head back upstairs, my mind racing with a plan to get Jason to confess on tape tomorrow morning. I reached the top of the basement stairs and stepped into the kitchen. The house was still silent. I crept through the hallway, my eyes adjusting to the dark. I reached the bottom of the main staircase. 1 step, 2 steps. I was halfway up when it happened. My foot landed on the 3rd step from the top, the one I had meant to fix for 10 years. The wood was warped, pulled away from the riser. Under my weight, it didn't just creak. It snapped, a loud dry crack that sounded like a pistol shot in the silent house. I froze. My heart stopped beating. I pressed myself against the banister, praying, begging the universe for silence. But the universe was not listening. Above me at the top of the stairs, the door to Jason's room flew open. It wasn't a slow creak. It was a violent shove. "Who is there?" Jason's voice boomed, panicked and aggressive. I couldn't move. If I ran, I would fall. If I stayed, I was caught. I looked up. A beam of harsh white light cut through the darkness, blinding me. He had a tactical flashlight, the kind I gave him for camping. The beam swung wildly for a second, before snapping down and hitting me square in the face. I squinted against the glare, raising a hand to shield my eyes, looking small and frail in my pajamas. "Dad," Jason's voice was incredulous, shifting quickly to suspicion. "How did you get out? I locked that door." He started down the stairs, the flashlight never wavering from my face. In his other hand, hanging by his side but ready, was something metallic. A glint of steel. It looked like a fire poker. I was halfway down the stairs, trapped between the basement and the safety of my room. The recorder in my pocket felt heavy as a brick. The wire taped to my chest felt like it was burning my skin. I had the evidence, but I had lost the element of surprise. The lion was in the cage with me, and he was awake. The beam of the tactical flashlight burned into my retinas, but I forced my eyes to stay wide and unblinking. I stared right through the light, aiming my gaze at the empty space over Jason's left shoulder. If I flinched, if I raised a hand to shield my face, he would know I was lucid. He would know I was spying. And that heavy iron fire poker in his hand would come down on my skull. He would tell the police I fell down the stairs in a fit of dementia. It would be a clean story. Elizabeth I whispered. My voice came out raspy, trembling with a mixture of calculated performance and genuine sorrow. Elizabeth, the garden gate is open. The frost is coming for your roses. I stood there, a ghost in my own pajamas, swaying slightly on the warped step. The silence in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. I could hear Jason's breathing, heavy and jagged. The flashlight beam wavered. He was deciding whether to hit me or help me. I held my breath, waiting for the blow. Jesus, Jason exhaled, the aggression draining out of his voice, replaced by annoyed exhaustion. He lowered the flashlight. He is seeing ghosts again. He thinks he is talking to Mom. Megan appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapping her silk robe tight around her body. Her eyes were sharp, scanning me like I was a broken appliance. Is he trying to run away? She hissed. Did he unlock the door? He picked the lock with a curtain wire, Jason muttered, kicking the bent piece of metal I had dropped on the landing. Or maybe I didn't turn it all the way. He is sleepwalking Megan. Look at him. He is completely gone. Megan walked down 2 steps and waved a hand in front of my face. I didn't blink. I kept my eyes fixed on the imaginary roses in the distance. Elizabeth, repeated softer this time, do not let them freeze. Grab him, Megan commanded. Put him back in bed. And this time push the dresser in front of the door. We cannot have him wandering around while we are trying to sleep. Jason grabbed my arm. His grip was rough, bruising. Come on, Dad. Mom is dead. The roses are dead. Go back to bed. He practically dragged me back up the stairs and shoved me into my room. I stumbled toward the bed, letting myself fall onto the mattress like a sack of laundry. I heard the door slam, then the heavy scraping sound of the hallway commode being dragged across the floorboards to barricade the door. They were sealing me in. I lay in the dark, my heart hammering against the battery pack taped to my chest. I had survived the night, but I knew the game had changed. They no longer saw me as a father. I was just a liability that wouldn't stay put. When the sun came up, the house felt different. It was brighter, cleaner, and infinitely more terrifying. Megan unlocked my door at 8 a.m. sharp. She was dressed in crisp scrubs, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She didn't say good morning. She just pointed to the bathroom. I walked in and stopped. The mirror was covered in neon yellow sticky notes. Brush teeth, one said in bold black marker. Wash hands, said another. I looked around. They were everywhere. On the toilet lid, lift lid. On the faucet, cold water. It was a gallery of humiliation. I walked out into the hallway. More notes. Bedroom, kitchen, downstairs. Every surface was tagged with simple, infantizing instructions. I went into the kitchen. Jason was sitting at the table drinking coffee. He didn't look at me. On the refrigerator, a massive note read, "Do not touch stove. Hot." What is all this? I asked, keeping my voice weak and confused. Megan breezed into the kitchen, placing a hand on my shoulder. It is for your own good, Hank. You were wandering last night. You were confused. You tried to go outside in the freezing cold to water dead flowers. We need to make sure you know where you are. She was not doing this for me. I realized that as soon as the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Higgins from next door, returning a casserole dish. Megan invited her in immediately, guiding her right past the refrigerator with the giant warning sign. Oh, poor Hank. Megan sighed loudly, making sure Mrs. Higgins saw the notes. We are trying our best, but the dementia is advancing so fast. He forgets how to use the bathroom. He tries to turn on the gas stove without lighting it. We are terrified he is going to hurt himself, Mrs. Higgins looked at me with pity. Oh, Henry, I am so sorry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I had successfully repaired the garbage disposal yesterday while they were arguing about money. I wanted to tell her that I knew exactly who the president was and could recite the amendments to the Constitution. But I saw the look in Megan's eyes. She was daring me to speak up. She was building a narrative. When I eventually died, she wanted every neighbor to tell the police, oh yes, poor Henry was so confused, it was only a matter of time before he had an accident. I looked at Mrs. Higgins and forced a confused smile. Is Elizabeth coming back with the groceries soon? I asked. Mrs. Higgins gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Megan shook her head sadly. See, he is stuck in 1999. Come on, Hank, let's get your pills. The rest of the morning was a masterclass in gaslighting. They moved my glasses so I couldn't find them. They changed the time on the grandfather clock in the hall to make me think I had lost hours of the day. They were trying to break my mind for real. They wanted me to doubt my own sanity so that when the time came I wouldn't fight back. But they made one mistake. They underestimated my bladder. Around noon, Megan went upstairs to take a shower. Jason was in the garage loudly arguing with someone on the phone about wire transfers. I was left alone in the living room with the TV blaring cartoons at full volume. I moved instantly. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went to the downstairs powder room where Megan kept her overflow medical supplies. She was a visiting nurse. She often kept samples and supplies in her bag. I had seen her leave her large tote bag on the counter in there earlier. I slipped into the small bathroom and closed the door. I didn't lock it. The click would be too loud. I dug through the bag. Bandages, saline blood pressure cuff, and a small insulated zipper pouch. I opened it. Inside were 3 vials of clear liquid and a handful of syringes. I held one of the vials up to the light, squinting to read the tiny label without my glasses. Humalog. Insulin Lispro. 100 units per milliliter. My blood ran cold. I knew every medical condition in my family. Elizabeth had hypertension. I had mild arthritis. Jason had high cholesterol. Nobody, absolutely nobody in this house was diabetic. I had investigated a case in 1988. A wealthy widow found dead in her bed. No signs of struggle. Heart failure, the coroner said. But her niece was a diabetic. We ordered a specific toxicology screen for synthetic insulin. It came back positive. An overdose of insulin in a non-diabetic causes profound hypoglycemia. The blood sugar crashes. The brain starves. You get sweaty, confused, maybe have a seizure, and then you slip into a coma. If you are sleeping, you might never wake up. And the best part, for a killer synthetic insulin breaks down quickly in the body. Unless the medical examiner looks for it specifically within a short window, it disappears. It looks exactly like natural death. This was the weapon. The tea last night had been laced with sedatives to knock me out. But this was the execution method. They weren't going to push me down the stairs. That was too messy, too much risk of police investigation. They were going to inject me with this while I slept. I would slip into a coma, my heart would stop, and Nurse Megan would call her doctor friend to certify a natural death caused by old age and grief. I put the vial back, my hands trembling with rage. I checked the expiration date. It was fresh. Stolen from the hospital supply recently. I stepped out of the bathroom just as the water stopped running upstairs. I sat back down in front of the TV, my mind racing faster than the cartoon characters on the screen. They had the weapon. They had the narrative. And thanks to my eavesdropping last night, I knew they had a deadline. Jason needed the money by Tuesday. That meant I had to be dead by Monday morning at the latest. They needed the weekend to stage the scene to get the paperwork started. They weren't planning to wait for me to die of natural causes. They were going to help me along, probably tonight or tomorrow. I looked at the sticky note on the coffee table. Stay here. I smiled grimly. Oh, I am staying right here. You want to play Dr. Megan? You want to play with needles? You picked the wrong patient. I touched the recorder beneath my shirt. I had the motive. I had the weapon. Now I just needed the confession. And then I would show them what a confused old man was really capable of. The doorbell rang at 2 in the afternoon, shattering the tense silence that had settled over the house. I was sitting in the living room staring at the turned-off television, my mind still reeling from the discovery of the insulin in the downstairs bathroom. I knew they were planning to kill me, but I did not expect them to bring in a consultant for the job. Jason rushed to the door, his movements jerky and agitated. He had been pacing for hours, checking his phone every 30 seconds. When he opened the door, I heard a voice I did not recognize. It was smooth, oily, and carried the distinct cadence of a man who sold things for a living, things that usually had hidden defects. Jason walked back into the living room, followed by a man who looked like he had been cut out of a magazine advertisement for personal injury attorneys. He wore a suit that was slightly too shiny, and a smile that did not reach his cold, calculating eyes. He was carrying a thick leather briefcase. "Dad, this is Mr. Fletcher," Jason said, gesturing to the man. "He is a friend of mine. He is here to help us with some paperwork." Mr. Fletcher stepped forward, extending a hand that felt damp and lifeless when I shook it. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Henry," he said. "Jason has told me so much about you. We just want to make sure your affairs are in order, especially given your recent health struggles." I played my part. I let my mouth hang open slightly and blinked slowly. "Who are you again?" I asked, my voice trembling. Fletcher exchanged a knowing look with Jason. "I am an attorney, Henry. I am here to help you sign a voluntary guardianship agreement. It is just a formality, really. It gives Jason the power to manage your finances and your health care, so you do not have to worry about a thing. You can just relax and rest." He sat down on the sofa opposite me and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document that was at least 20 pages long, stapled at the top with a blue cover sheet. He placed it on the coffee table and uncapped a heavy, expensive-looking fountain pen. "Just sign right here on the bottom line," he said, pointing to a sticky tab. "We can fill in the dates later." I leaned forward, squinting at the paper. My heart was pounding, but my brain was icy cool. I had spent 40 years reading contracts. I knew that the devil was always in the details, and this document was practically written in sulfur. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out my reading glasses, putting them on with agonizing slowness. "I should probably read it first," I said, my voice soft. "Elizabeth always said never sign anything you have not read." Jason let out an impatient sigh. "Dad, it is standard legal stuff. You won't understand half of it. Just sign it so Mr. Fletcher can get back to his office." I ignored him. I picked up the document and brought it close to my face. As I scanned the first page, my suspicion turned into certainty. This was not a standard guardianship agreement. This was a total abdication of rights. It granted Jason full power of attorney effective immediately, with no requirement for medical certification of incapacity. It allowed him to liquidate assets, transfer deeds, and even make end-of-life decisions without a second opinion. But then I saw it. A mistake. A sloppy, amateur mistake in the boilerplate text on page 3. It referenced a state statute regarding asset forfeiture that had been repealed in Illinois 5 years ago. Fletcher had not even drafted this himself. He had probably downloaded a template from the internet or used an old file from a previous scam. I looked up at Fletcher. He was checking his watch, looking bored. He thought he was dealing with a senile old man. He had no idea he was sitting across from a man who used to tear apart fraudulent contracts for breakfast. "I need to read this part," I said, pointing to the middle of the page. "It says here, you can sell the house." "That is just in case of emergencies, Dad," Jason snapped. "We are not selling the house. We just need the option, if you get sick and need expensive care." I nodded slowly, pretending to be reassured. I reached for the pen Fletcher was holding. He handed it to me. It was a Mont Blanc heavy and filled with black ink. I held it over the document, my hand shaking violently. "I am just so nervous," I whispered. "I do not want to do the wrong thing. Just sign it." Henry Fletcher said, his voice hardening slightly, "It is for your own good." I brought the pen down to the paper, but instead of signing, I pressed the nib hard against the paper until it bent. Then I jerked my hand as if I was having a spasm. The pen flew out of my fingers. It hit the full cup of coffee that Jason had left on the table. The cup tipped over. Brown liquid and black ink exploded across the table, soaking the document instantly. The dark stain spread like a cancer across the white pages, obliterating the signature line and turning the legal text into a soggy, unreadable mess. "Oh no," I cried, bringing my hands to my face. "Oh, I am so clumsy. Look what I did." Jason jumped up, his face turning purple with rage. "Dad, are you serious?" Fletcher snatched the dripping papers off the table, but it was too late. They were ruined. "That was the original," he hissed at Jason. "I do not have another copy with me. The printer in my car is out of ink." I shrank back into my chair, looking small and terrified. "I am sorry," I wailed. "I just wanted to sign it. My hands, they just do not work like they used to." Jason looked like he wanted to strangle me right there. He took a deep breath, his hands balled into fists. "It is fine," he said through gritted teeth. "It is fine. Mr. Fletcher can go back to his office and print another one. He can come back tomorrow." Fletcher stood up, wiping coffee off his suit jacket. "It will have to be tomorrow morning. I have a dinner engagement tonight." He glared at me with pure venom. "Try not to break anything else, Henry." As Fletcher walked to the door, I knew I had bought myself about 12 hours. But 12 hours was not enough. If they came back tomorrow with fresh papers, I would have no excuse. And if I refused to sign, Jason might just decide to skip the legal route and use the insulin tonight. I needed to change the game. I needed to give them a reason to keep me alive and coherent. I waited until the front door closed and Jason came back into the room. He was fuming. He kicked the coffee table, sending the empty cup skittering across the floor. "You are useless," he shouted at me. "You cannot even sign your name without making a mess. Do you know how much trouble you are causing me?" I looked up at him, and for the first time in days, I dropped the confused act just a fraction. I made my eyes clear and focused. "Jason," I said, my voice steady, "why are we making this so complicated?" He stopped, surprised by the change in my tone. "What?" I gestured to the soggy papers. "All this legal mumbo-jumbo. Guardianship. Courts. It takes so long." "I know you need money, son." Jason froze. The color drained from his face. "What did you say?" "I know you are having trouble," I continued, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. "I heard you on the phone. You are stressed. And honestly, I am tired of this big house. It is too full of memories of your mother. Every time I walk down that hall, I see her ghost." Jason narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "What are you saying, Dad?" "I am saying, let's sell it," I said. "Let's just sell the damn house. I do not want to live here anymore. I want to take the cash and go." "Go where?" Jason asked, stepping closer. I shrugged. "Anywhere. Italy, France, a cruise ship. I have always wanted to see the world before my mind goes completely. If we sell the house, I can give you half the money right away. A gift. No taxes, no lawyers, no waiting for me to die. You can pay off your debts, and I can spend my last years sitting on a beach instead of rotting in this house." I saw the gears turning in his head. He was doing the math. The house was worth $1.5 million. Half of that would clear his debt to the loan sharks and leave him with a nice cushion. And more importantly, it was immediate. Guardianship took time to process. Probate took months. A cash sale to an investor could happen in days. But he was suspicious. You want to sell? You. You said you would never leave this house. I looked at the stain on the rug where Megan had spilled the tea yesterday. I looked at the empty space on the mantel where Elizabeth's urn should have been. This is not my home anymore, I said, and it was the most honest thing I had said all day. It is just a building, and I am ready to leave it. Jason looked at me for a long moment. He was looking for the trap. But greed is a powerful blinder. He saw a way out of his own hole. He saw a pile of cash with his name on it. I can make some calls, he said slowly. I know some investors, guys who buy for cash. We could close by Tuesday. Tuesday, the deadline. It fit perfectly. Do it, I said. Get the papers. I will sign the deed transfer. I just want to get out of here. Jason grinned. It was a predatory smile, but for the first time in days, it wasn't murderous. It was purely transactional. Okay, Dad. Okay. I will call Fletcher back. We will draw up a sale agreement instead. He turned and ran out of the room, pulling his phone from his pocket. I slumped back in the chair. The tension in my chest eased slightly. I had just taken the target off my back. They wouldn't use the insulin tonight. They couldn't. If I died tonight, the house would go into probate, and Jason wouldn't see a dime for months. The loan sharks would break his legs before the funeral was over. He needed me alive. He needed me walking, talking, and signing papers until the money was in his hand. I had just bought myself 3 days of life, but I knew I had also just started a ticking clock. Once that deed was signed, I would be useless to them again. I had 3 days to turn the tables. 3 days to get the confession. 3 days to lead them into the trap I was building. I looked at the wet spot on the table where the ink had pooled. It looked like a black Rorschach test. To Jason, it looked like money. To me, it looked like a reprieve. I touched the hidden button camera on my chest, ensuring it was still secure. Make the call, son, I whispered to the empty room. Bring the wolves to the door. I will be waiting. Sunday morning arrived with a deceptive brightness that mocked the darkness inside my house. The sun streamed through the bay windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, unaware that they were witnessing a crime in progress. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee that I had brewed myself, watching Jason pace the floor. He was manic, his energy vibrating off him like heat waves from hot asphalt. He was on the phone coordinating with the cash buyer, a real estate investor, who specialized in distressed properties and quick closings. I knew the type. They were vultures who circled dying families, picking the meat off the bones for pennies on the dollar. But today I had to welcome the vulture. I had to invite him into my nest and pretend I was happy to be eaten. When the doorbell rang, Jason practically sprinted to answer it. He returned with a man named Mr. Thorne, who smelled of expensive cologne and cheap ambition. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car, and looked at my home not as a place where a family grew up, but as square footage to be flipped. I stood up, leaning heavily on the cane I did not actually need, and extended a trembling hand. Welcome, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I just want to get this over with. I want to move to Florida before the snow hits. Thorne looked at Jason with a raised eyebrow, clearly surprised by how cooperative the senile old father was. Jason beamed, a look of pure relief washing over his face. Dad is very eager to retire, Jason said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. We are all ready to move on. Excellent, Thorne said, opening a folder. Let us take a quick tour to assess the structural integrity, and then we can talk numbers. I have a checkbook in my car. I played my role to perfection. I shuffled along with them, pointing out the crown molding and the hardwood floors underneath the carpet. I told stories about the fireplace, trying to sound wistful and slightly confused, getting the dates wrong on purpose. I saw Jason rolling his eyes behind my back, but he remained patient. He needed me to be compliant. He needed that signature. When we reached the second floor, I stopped pretending to be out of breath. You two go ahead, I wheezed, clutching the banister. My knees are not what they used to be. Show him the attic, Jason. Show him the new insulation we put in last year. Jason hesitated for a split second, looking at me and then at the open door to his makeshift office down the hall. But greed won out. He wanted to secure the deal. You stay here, Dad, rest for a minute. We will be right back. As soon as they disappeared up the narrow stairs to the attic, I moved. The cane dropped to the carpet. The stoop in my back vanished. I moved down the hallway with the silence of a predator entering Jason's temporary office. His laptop was open on the desk. The screen was dark, but the power light was blinking. I sat down, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tapped the spacebar. The screen flared to life, asking for a password. I knew my son. He was not a complex man. He was lazy and he was arrogant. He wouldn't use a random string of characters. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried his wedding anniversary. Incorrect. I paused, closing my eyes, trying to think like him. What did he care about most? What was the driving force of his life right now? I typed in the word money followed by the number 1. The screen unlocked. It was pathetic, really, but I did not have time to pity his stupidity. I had minutes before they came back down. I pulled a small USB drive from my pocket, one I had swiped from my old investigation kit in the basement. I plugged it in and launched a simple keylogger program. It would record every keystroke he made, every password, every email draft. But while that installed, I needed to see what he had been looking at. I opened his browser history. It was a map of his desperation. Online gambling sites, forums about bankruptcy, and then a link to an insurance portal. I clicked it. It was already logged in. My breath caught in my throat. There on the screen was a policy document dated 2 weeks ago. It was a term life insurance policy on my life. The coverage amount was $2 million, but it was the rider clause that made my blood freeze. The policy had a double indemnity clause for accidental death occurring within the primary residence. If I died of a heart attack, they got $2 million. If I fell down the stairs or drowned in the bathtub or had a fatal mishap with the gas stove, they got $4 million. This was why they had not just smothered me with a pillow. This was why they were keeping me here. They needed an accident. The insulin I found was perfect. A sudden drop in blood sugar could cause a fall, a loss of consciousness. If I fell down the stairs after an insulin injection, the medical examiner might miss the needle prick, but he would definitely see the broken neck. They were not just planning a murder, they were planning a payday that would set them up for life. I quickly downloaded the PDF of the policy to the USB drive. I heard footsteps on the floorboards above me. They were coming back. I yanked the drive out, shoved it into my pocket, and closed the laptop. I hurried back into the hallway, picking up my cane just as the attic door opened. Dad. Jason called out, his voice cheerful. You okay out here? I am fine, son, I said, leaning against the wall and breathing heavily, just catching my breath. The rest of the tour was a blur. Thorne made an offer. It was low, but I accepted it immediately. Jason looked like he had won the lottery. We shook hands. Papers would be drawn up tomorrow, Tuesday, the deadline. That afternoon, the house fell into a strange lull. Jason went out to celebrate with Thorne, probably to finalize the kickback he was getting. Megan stayed behind to watch me. She was in the kitchen chopping vegetables with a large knife, the rhythmic thud against the cutting board echoing through the house like a war drum. I sat in the living room, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. I had the motive. I had the method. But I needed help. I needed to get this evidence to someone who could use it. I needed to call Detective Miller, or at least Benny, to let them know I was still alive. I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs. Megan had a routine. She showered at 4 in the afternoon before her evening shift if she was working or just to wash off the day. I checked the hallway. Clear. I went to the landline phone in the study. I picked up the receiver. No dial tone. They had unplugged it. Of course they had. I cursed under my breath. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. I had managed to keep my old flip phone hidden, but the battery was dead. I had found a charger in the junk drawer earlier. I plugged it in behind the sofa, crouching down to hide. The phone screen lit up. 1 bar of signal. It was enough. I dialed Benny's number. My hands were shaking so bad I hit the wrong key twice. Finally it rang. "Hello," a voice answered. "Benny." "Benny, it is me," I whispered, pressing the phone to my ear. "Listen to me. I have the evidence. They took out a policy. 4 million for an accident." Henry Benny's voice was high with panic. "You have to get out of there." I saw Jason in town. He was buying plastic sheeting and duct tape at the hardware store. A chill went down my spine. They were prepping the kill room. "I know, Benny," I said. "Listen, I am going to try to leave tonight. If I do not call you by morning, give the photos to the police. Do not wait. Just go." "I will, Henry. Please be care." The phone was ripped from my hand. I spun around, losing my balance and falling back against the sofa. Megan was standing there. She was not in the shower. Her hair was dry. She had tricked me. She had turned on the water to lure me out. She looked at the phone in her hand, and then at me. Her face was a mask of cold fury. There was no sweetness left, no fake nurse persona, just the predator looking at the prey. "Who were you talking to?" she asked, her voice quiet and deadly. "Nobody," I stammered, scrambling to get up. "Just checking the time." She looked at the screen, which was still connected to the call. "Benny," she read aloud. "The photo guy." She threw the phone against the brick fireplace. It shattered into plastic shrapnel, the battery flying across the room. "You stupid old man," she spat, walking toward me. "We tried to be nice to you. We tried to make this comfortable. But you just cannot help yourself, can you?" She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh. "You think the police will believe you? You think a judge will listen to a man who wets himself and talks to his dead wife? We have documented everything, Henry. The neighbors think you are crazy. The doctor thinks you are senile. Even your son thinks you are losing it." She shoved me down onto the sofa. "You are all alone, Henry. Nobody is coming for you. Nobody cares." She walked to the internet router in the corner of the room and yanked the cords out of the wall. She gathered the power cables for the television and the lamps. "No more phone," she said. "No more TV. No more wandering." She marched to the front door, and I heard the deadbolt slide home. Then she went to the back door and keyed the lock. She turned to me, dangling the keys in front of my face. "You want to leave?" she taunted. "Go ahead. Try. But if you make one more sound, if you try to signal anyone, I will inject you with enough sedative to stop a horse, and I will tell the paramedics you overdosed on your own meds. Do you understand me?" I nodded, looking at the floor. I let my shoulders slump. I let the tears of frustration well up in my eyes. "Good," she said. "Now sit there and be quiet. Jason will be home soon, and then we can decide what to do with you." She walked away, leaving me in the dimming light of the living room. I was cut off, no phone, no internet, trapped in a house that was being prepped for my murder. But as I sat there, I felt a strange calm settle over me. She had destroyed the phone, but she hadn't checked my pocket. The USB drive was still there. And more importantly, she had made a mistake. She had confirmed everything. She had stopped pretending. There were no more lies between us. The game of cat and mouse was over. The trap was set. Now it was just a matter of who would step into it first. I touched the button camera on my chest. I hoped the battery would last, because tonight was going to be a long night. The silence in the house was absolute suffocating. Megan had confiscated all electronics and had taken to sitting in the kitchen chair by the hallway like a prison warden monitoring cell block C. I was trapped in the living room staring out the bay window at the gray street. It was Monday morning. Tomorrow was the closing. Tomorrow was the deadline. If I did not act today, I would be dead by Wednesday. I watched the clock on the mantelpiece, its ticking the only sound in the room. 11:15. Tom the mailman usually came around 11:30. Tom was a fixture in the neighborhood, a Vietnam vet with a limp and a grumpy demeanor that hid a heart of gold. We had bonded years ago over a shared appreciation for old Buicks. He was my only hope. But how to signal him without Megan seeing? I couldn't wave. I couldn't open the window. I reached into my pocket and felt the crisp edges of a $20 bill I had stashed away weeks ago for emergencies. I pulled it out, keeping it hidden in my palm. I needed a pen. There was one on the side table next to the unfinished crossword puzzle Megan allowed me to have. I uncapped it, shielding my movements with my body. On the border of the bill, I scrawled in tiny letters, SOS, call Miller 5550199, code Bluebird. Bluebird was the code word I used with my old partner Miller back in the fraud unit. It meant officer in immediate danger. Drop everything and come running. I heard the rumble of the mail truck. It was stopping 2 houses down. I stood up, clutching my cane. I need some air, I announced loudly. I am going to check the mail. Megan looked up from her magazine, instantly suspicious. I will get the mail, she said, standing up. I waved a dismissive hand. I need to stretch my legs, Megan. My doctor said I need to walk, unless you want me to get a blood clot and die right here in your living room. She hesitated. The mention of a blood clot and a messy death in the living room made her pause. She did not want me dying before the papers were signed tomorrow. Fine, she snapped. But be quick. It is freezing out there. I walked to the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I opened it, and the cold air hit me like a slap, waking me up. I shuffled down the walkway, exaggerating my limp. Tom was just pulling up to my mailbox. He saw me and his face lit up with a mixture of surprise and concern. He hadn't seen me in weeks. Hey, Hank, he called out, leaning out of his truck. Long time no see. I thought you moved to Florida already. I reached the mailbox just as he was shoving a stack of flyers inside. I leaned in close, blocking Megan's view from the window with my body. Tom, I whispered, my voice urgent and low. Take this. Do not look at it now. Just take it. I thrust the $20 bill into his hand, along with a generic piece of junk mail I pretended to be retrieving. Tom frowned, confused, but his instincts honed in, the jungle kicked in. He palmed the bill instantly. Hank, you okay? He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. You look like hell. I am trapped, I hissed. They are going to kill me. Read the bill. Make the call. Please, Tom. I stepped back loudly, saying thank you for the mail, Tom, just as the front door flew open. Megan marched out, her coat thrown hastily over her shoulders. What is taking so long? She demanded, her eyes darting between me and Tom. Tom didn't miss a beat. He leaned out the window, his face twisting into a scowl. I was just telling your father here that he needs to trim these hedges, lady. They are scratching my truck. Megan blinked, taken aback by his aggression. Excuse me, you heard me, Tom growled. Keep your bushes trimmed or I will stop delivering. Have a nice day. He revved the engine and peeled away, leaving a cloud of exhaust in the cold air. I watched him go, a silent prayer following his truck. He had the message. Now I just had to hope he would read it. Megan grabbed my arm, her grip bruising. Get inside, she hissed. You are making a scene. She dragged me back into the house and slammed the door. She snatched the junk mail from my hand and threw it in the trash. No more going outside, she declared. You stay in this room until Jason gets home. I sat back down in the armchair, my hands trembling. I had cast my line. Now I had to wait for a bite. 2 hours passed. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the floor. I was starting to lose hope. Maybe Tom just spent the 20 on lunch. Maybe he thought I was just a senile old man writing nonsense on money. Then the doorbell rang. Megan jumped. She looked at the peephole. "It is the mailman again," she muttered. "What does he want now?" She opened the door, but kept the chain on. What she barked. Tom was standing there holding a medium-sized package wrapped in brown paper. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice flat. "I found this in the back of the truck. Must have slid under the seat. It is for Henry. Marked priority." Megan frowned. "We are not expecting anything. It says Henry Mitchell." Tom said, holding it up. "Look, I just want to get rid of it. I want to go home." Megan sighed and undid the chain. "Give it to me." Tom stepped into the doorway, but he didn't hand it to her. He looked past her directly at me, sitting in the chair. "Henry, you got a sign for this," he said. "High-value item." I stood up, my heart leaping. "Tom, you beautiful genius." Megan tried to grab the clipboard. "I can sign for him. I am his caretaker." Tom pulled the clipboard back. "Sorry, lady. Federal regulations. Addressee only. Unless you have a power of attorney document on you right now." Megan grit her teeth. She didn't. Not yet. She stepped aside, glaring at me. "Hurry up and sign it, Hank." I walked to the door. Tom held out the clipboard and a pen. I looked him in the eye. "Thank you, Tom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He winked. Just a barely perceptible twitch of his eyelid. As I signed my name, he leaned in close, pretending to point at the line. "Bluebird is flying," he whispered. "Miller is on his way. Sit tight, soldier." I signed with a flourish, feeling a surge of strength I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you, Tom," I said, handing the clipboard back. He handed me the package. It felt light. Too light. Probably just an empty box he found in his truck to create a pretext. But it was the most valuable package I had ever received. Tom turned to Megan. "Have a nice day, ma'am, and trim those hedges." He walked away, whistling. Megan slammed the door and locked it. She snatched the package from my hands. "Let me see that," she snapped. She ripped the brown paper open. It was a box of diabetic chocolates. Sugar-free. She stared at it, confused. "Who sent you chocolates?" I shrugged, hiding my smile. "Maybe an old friend," I said. "Maybe someone who knows I am sweet enough already." Megan threw the box on the table. "Whatever. Go sit down." But I saw the way she looked at me. The suspicion was back, and it was deeper this time. She paced the room, chewing her lip. Why did the mailman come back? Why did he insist on me signing? She was putting the pieces together. She wasn't smart enough to figure out the code, but she was smart enough to know something was wrong. When Jason came home at 6, Megan pulled him into the kitchen immediately. I could hear their hushed, urgent whispers. He was talking to the mailman, Jason. Twice. So what? Jason's voice was dismissive. He is a lonely old man. He talks to the plants. It felt different, Megan insisted. And the mailman was acting weird. Aggressive. "Jason, we need to be careful." What if he told him something? Told him what? Jason scoffed. That we are mean to him. Who cares? We have the sale tomorrow. Once he signs the papers, nobody will listen to him. But Megan wasn't convinced. She came out of the kitchen, her eyes cold and hard. She walked up to me and grabbed my cane. "You do not need this inside," she said. "You might trip over it." She took my cane, leaving me defenseless. Then she took the package of chocolates. "And you do not need these either." Too much excitement. She marched me upstairs earlier than usual. 7 o'clock. "Bedtime, Hank," she said, pushing me into my room. I turned to protest, but she held up a hand. "Do not. Just do not. We have a big day tomorrow. You need your rest." She stepped out, and I heard the lock click. But then I heard something else. The sound of a drill. I pressed my ear to the door. Jason was installing a heavy-duty deadbolt on the outside of my bedroom door. "Just to be safe," I heard Megan say. "We cannot have him wandering tonight." Not tonight. I backed away from the door. They were locking me down. They were sealing the tomb. I sat on the edge of my bed and touched the button camera on my chest. I had the evidence. I had the ally. Miller was coming. But Miller couldn't break down a steel door before they got to me. I looked at the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the concrete patio. No escape there. I was trapped in a box, and the walls were closing in. But for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid. I was angry, and I was ready. I pulled the chocolates Tom had brought me out of my pocket. I had managed to palm a few before Megan took the box. I unwrapped one and popped it into my mouth. It tasted like chalk and chemicals, but to me, it tasted like hope. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, shoes on. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to wait. Because when Miller arrived, I needed to be ready to kick the door down from the inside if I had to. "Come on, Miller," I whispered to the dark ceiling. "Do not let me down." Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window pane. It sounded like a storm was coming. But the real storm was already inside the house, and it was about to break. The wind battered against the window pane like a frantic ghost, trying to warn me. Inside the room, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of my own fear and the metallic tang of adrenaline. I checked my watch. 7:30. The sun had set hours ago, plunging the world outside into an abyssal darkness. I knew Jason and Megan were downstairs. I could hear the muffled thumping of music, jazz, festive and incongruous. They were celebrating. They were celebrating my death before my body was even cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hand clutching the small Sony voice recorder and the button camera battery pack. If they came in now, if they searched me, it would be over. They would find the devices, destroy them, and then destroy me. I needed to hide them, but not inside the room. Megan had already tossed the room once. She would do it again. I looked at the window. It was an old sash window painted shut years ago to stop drafts. I grabbed the metal letter opener I kept in the nightstand drawer, one of the few sharp objects they hadn't confiscated. I jammed the tip into the seam between the frame and the sash. I pushed with all my remaining strength. The old paint cracked with a sound like a breaking bone. I paused, holding my breath, waiting for footsteps in the hall. Nothing. The music downstairs covered the noise. I pushed again, gritting my teeth until my jaw ached. The window groaned and slid up 3 inches. A blast of freezing air hit me, numbing my face instantly. I looked out. Below me was a sheer drop to the concrete patio. But just to the right, running along the facade under the windows, was a narrow, decorative ledge barely 6 inches wide where Elizabeth used to keep her summer geraniums. The pots were still there, filled with frozen dead soil. I knew what I had to do. It was madness for a man of my age, but desperation had made me agile. I wrapped the recorder and the battery pack in a handkerchief. I pushed the window up another few inches, just enough to squeeze my arm through. The wind howled, threatening to tear the sash from my grip. I leaned out. The vertigo hit me instantly, the world spinning in a nauseating blur of black and gray. I reached for the nearest terracotta pot. My fingers brushed the rough clay. I dug a small hole in the hard frozen dirt and shoved the bundle inside, covering it quickly with dead leaves and soil. I pulled my arm back in and slid the window down, leaving it cracked just a fraction of an inch so I could pry it open again. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, my heart fluttering like a trapped bird. I was safe. Let them search the room. Let them strip the bed. The evidence was suspended 20 feet above the ground, guarded by the winter wind. I had barely regained my breath when the heavy deadbolt on my door slid back with a clank. I scrambled to my feet, smoothing my rumpled cardigan, trying to look defeated rather than winded. The door swung open. Jason stood there. He was wearing his best suit, but his tie was loose and his face was flushed. He held a bottle of expensive scotch in one hand and 2 crystal tumblers in the other. He swayed slightly. He was already drunk. "Dad," he boomed, a terrifyingly jovial smile plastered on his face. "Why are you sitting in the dark? Come on, we have good news." I blinked, playing the part. "Good news?" I asked, my voice weak. "We sold it," Jason shouted, stepping into the room and kicking the door shut behind him. "Thorne made a cash offer tonight. We close tomorrow morning. Can you believe it? All our problems gone." Poof. He laughed, a sound that lacked any real joy. It was the manic relief of a man who had just outrun an avalanche. He poured a generous measure of scotch into one of the glasses and shoved it into my hand. Amber liquid sloshed over my fingers. "Drink up, old man," he said. "To the future. To Florida." I looked at the glass. I knew better than to drink anything they gave me, but I also saw an opportunity. Jason was sloppy. He was arrogant, and he was distracted by his own victory. I need to freshen up first," I said, holding the glass but not drinking. "I feel dusty. Let me wash my face." Jason rolled his eyes. "Fine. Hurry up." Megan made a roast. "We are having a family dinner, a farewell dinner to the house." He turned and stumbled back into the hallway, leaving the door open. "I will wait for you downstairs. Do not make me come back up." As soon as he turned the corner, I moved. I didn't go to the bathroom. I went back to the window. I knew I needed that recorder. If this was the Last Supper, if they were planning to end it tonight, this was my only chance to get a confession. A recorded confession was the only thing that would put them away for life. It was a gamble. If they searched me downstairs, I was dead. If I didn't have it, I was dead anyway without justice. I shoved the window up. The cold bit at me again. I reached out my fingers, scrabbling in the frozen dirt of the flower pot. I felt the bundle. I yanked it out, shaking off the soil. I slipped the recorder into the inside breast pocket of my cardigan and the button camera battery pack into my trouser pocket, feeding the wire up under my shirt. I checked the red light. It was blinking. Rolling. I closed the window and walked out of the room, the evidence burning against my ribs. I was walking to my own execution, hoping to catch the executioner on tape before the axe fell. The dining room was set like a scene from a magazine. Candles flickered in the silver candelabras. The good china, Elizabeth's wedding china, was laid out. Megan was placing a massive roast beef in the center of the table. She looked up as I entered. She was wearing pearls and a silk dress, but her eyes were cold, assessing. "You decided to join us," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Sit down, Hank." I sat at the head of the table, my usual spot. Jason sat to my right, Megan to my left. The bottle of scotch was already half empty. Jason poured more into my glass until it was brimming. "Drink, Dad," he commanded. "It is Blue Label. The good stuff." I lifted the glass. My hand trembled, not an act this time. I brought it to my lips and tilted it, letting the liquid touch my tongue, but keeping my throat closed. I pretended to swallow, then wiped my mouth with a napkin, spitting the liquor into the fabric when they looked away to pass the potatoes. "This is a nice party," I stammered. "It is a celebration," Jason corrected, slurring slightly. "We are rich, Dad." "Well, you are rich, but you are going to share right. Because family takes care of family." He laughed again, stabbing a piece of meat with unnecessary violence. Megan didn't laugh. She watched me eat. I took small bites, chewing slowly. The food tasted like ash. I knew I had to push them. I had to get them talking about the past, about the one thing that bound us all in this twisted knot, Elizabeth. I looked at the empty chair at the other end of the table. "I miss her," I whispered into the silence. Jason stopped chewing. Don't start, Dad. Not tonight. I cannot help it, I continued, letting a tear slide down my cheek. I keep thinking about that night, the night she died. Megan's fork scraped loudly against her plate. Hank, eat your dinner. I looked at Jason. His eyes were glassy, swimming in alcohol and guilt. He was the weak link. Megan was a sociopath, but Jason was just a desperate coward. She looked so peaceful, I said, leaning in. But was she? The doctor said it was a heart attack. But I read that heart attacks are painful. Did she suffer, Jason? Did she call out for me? Jason took a massive gulp of scotch. She didn't suffer, he muttered. Drop it. How do you know? I pressed, my voice rising slightly, playing the agitated drunk old man. Were you there? Did you see her eyes? I need to know, son. I need to know if she was in pain. It is killing me. I can hear her screaming in my dreams. Stop it, Megan snapped. She is dead, Hank. It does not matter. It matters to me, I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. The cutlery rattled. It matters because I wasn't there to save her. Jason slammed his glass down. It shattered. Scotch and shards of crystal flew across the tablecloth. Shut up, he roared, his face twisting into a snarl. You want to know. You really want to know, Jason? No, Megan warned, reaching for his arm. He shook her off. No, let him hear it. He is going to find out soon enough anyway. He leaned across the table, his breath reeking of alcohol and malice. His face was inches from mine. She didn't feel a thing, Dad. She didn't scream. She didn't even wake up. She went to sleep and she just drifted away. It was a mercy. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard I thought the microphone would pick it up. How I whispered. How can you be sure? Because we made sure, Jason yelled, throwing his arms out. We gave her peace, we gave her a cocktail that sent her straight to the angels. No pain, no struggle, just lights out. The room went dead silent. The candle flames danced in the sudden stillness. Jason blinked, realizing what he had just said. He looked at Megan. She was staring at him with a look of pure hatred. You idiot, she hissed. I sat back in my chair, the recorder burning a hole in my pocket. I had it. I had the confession. We gave her a cocktail. We made sure. I looked at Jason, letting the mask slip. I let the confusion fade from my eyes. I let the grief transform into the cold, hard stare of the investigator I used to be. Thank you, son, I said, my voice steady and clear. That is all I needed to hear. Jason frowned. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in days. He saw the clarity in my gaze. He saw the absence of the tremor in my hands. The fog of alcohol seemed to clear from his brain for a second, replaced by a dawn of suspicion. He narrowed his eyes. He looked down at my chest. The heavy wool of my cardigan was bunched slightly on the left side where the square shape of the recorder pressed against the fabric. What is that? He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. He reached out a hand, pointing at my chest. What is in your pocket, Dad? Why is your jacket glowing? I looked down. The red recording light. In my haste to retrieve it from the flower pot, I hadn't taped over the LED. It was glowing faintly through the weave of the wool, a tiny pulsing heartbeat of red in the dim candlelight. Jason stood up, kicking his chair back. It fell over with a crash. Show me what is in your pocket, he commanded, moving around the table. Megan stood up too, grabbing a steak knife from the platter. I pushed my chair back, trying to stand, but my legs tangled in the tablecloth. I was trapped. The evidence was running. The truth was out, and the killer was closing in. Give it to me, Jason screamed, lunging for my chest. Jason lunged across the table, his eyes wild with a mixture of alcohol-fueled rage and paranoia. His hand clawed at the front of my cardigan, seeking the source of the faint red glow he thought he had seen. I had a fraction of a second to act. If he felt the hard plastic square of the Sony recorder or the battery pack taped to my chest, the game would be over. I would not live to see the sunrise, and my death would be written off as a drunken fall down the stairs. I threw my hands up in a gesture of pathetic surrender, leaning back into the chair so hard it tipped onto its rear legs. As I did, I used my left hand to jam the recorder deeper into the inner pocket, while my right hand fumbled frantically in the outer patch pocket where the bulge was most visible. "What is it?" Jason screamed, grabbing my lapel and yanking me forward so violently that my teeth clacked together. "Show me what you are hiding, old man. Show me right now." I let out a sob, a genuine sound of terror that seemed to satisfy his predatory instinct. I pulled my hand out of the pocket, trembling violently, and opened my fist. Resting on my palm was not a piece of electronic equipment, but a square of blue silk embroidered with white daisies. It was Elizabeth's favorite handkerchief, the one she had carried in her purse for 40 years. I had doused it with her perfume weeks ago and kept it on me to remember her scent. "It is hers," I wailed, shoving the fabric toward his face. "It is just hers. I keep it close to my heart, Jason. It is the only thing I have left. I just wanted to feel her close to me." Jason froze. He stared at the handkerchief and then at my tear-streaked face. He blinked, the adrenaline draining out of him, leaving him swaying and confused. He looked down at my chest again. The heavy wool of the cardigan had settled, and in the chaos I had managed to slide the recorder down so the light was buried deep against my ribs. There was no glow. There was no bulge. Just a sad old man clutching a piece of his dead wife's clothing. Megan let out a harsh, cruel laugh from the other side of the table. "You are losing it, Jason," she sneered. "He is hiding a snot rag, and you are acting like he is wearing a wire. Sit down before you hurt him and leave marks. We cannot have bruises on him for the closing tomorrow." Jason released me, shoving me back against the chair. He ran a hand over his face, looking embarrassed and angry at his own foolishness. I thought I saw something," he muttered. "You saw your own guilty conscience," Megan said, picking up her wine glass. "Go to bed, Hank. Take your handkerchief and your sob story and go to bed. And do not come out until we come for you." I scrambled out of the chair, clutching the silk to my chest like a shield. I did not look back. I shuffled to the stairs, my legs feeling like jelly. As I climbed, I heard Jason pouring himself another drink, the glass clinking against the bottle with a desperate urgency. I had survived the night, but only just. The next morning, the sun rose with a blinding indifference. Tuesday, Judgment Day. Megan woke me at 7 sharp. There were no sticky notes today, no games. She was all business, dressed in a severe black dress that made her look like a mourning widow or an executioner. She threw a suit onto my bed, my best navy blue suit, the one I wore to Elizabeth's funeral. "Put this on," she ordered, "and shave. You look like a bum. We have people coming at 9. I dressed slowly, my fingers stiff. I checked the recorder. The tape was full. I had the confession. I had the audio of Jason admitting they gave Elizabeth a cocktail. Now I just needed to survive the meeting. I taped the recorder to the small of my back under my dress shirt and undershirt. It was risky, but I couldn't leave it in the room. If they decided to toss the room while I was signing papers, I would lose everything. At 8:55, the doorbell rang. I was sitting in the living room, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the dust motes dancing in the light. Jason opened the door. He was wearing a fresh suit, but his eyes were bloodshot, and his skin had the gray pallor of a severe hangover. "Mr. Mitchell, good morning," a deep baritone voice boomed from the entryway. My heart skipped a beat. I knew that voice. I had heard it in courtrooms and interrogation rooms for 30 years. It was Miller. Jason led 2 men into the living room. One was a young, nervous-looking man with a notary seal bag. The other was an older man, with silver hair cut in a military style, wearing a trench coat that looked like it had seen better days. He walked with a slight limp, relying on a cane that matched mine. "Dad, this is Mr. Miller," Jason said. "He is the closing attorney sent by the buyer, Mr. Thorne, and this is the notary." I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane. Miller looked at me. His face was a mask of professional disinterest. There was not a flicker of recognition in his eyes, not a twitch of a smile. He was a pro. He knew that if Jason suspected we knew each other, the deal and my life would be over. "Mr. Mitchell," Miller said, extending a hand. "A pleasure. I understand we are doing an expedited closing today." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and reassuring. He gave my hand a single, imperceptible squeeze before letting go. "A pleasure," I mumbled, letting my voice quaver. "I just want to get this over with." We all sat around the large dining room table, the same table where Jason had confessed to murder less than 12 hours ago. Megan had removed the tablecloth to hide the wine stains, but the ghost of the conversation still hung in the air. Miller opened his briefcase and began laying out documents. Stacks of paper, deed transfers, title affidavits, bill of sale. Jason stood behind my chair, his hand resting on the backrest. It felt like a threat. Megan stood to my left, hovering like a vulture. "We will need to start with the deed transfer," Miller said, sliding a heavy document toward me. "This transfers ownership of the property from Henry Mitchell to the holding company designated by Mr. Thorne. Once this is signed, the funds will be wired to the account provided by your son." I looked at the paper. It was the death warrant of my life in this house, but it was also the bait. I reached into my pocket for my glasses. I put them on my hands, shaking. This time I did not have to fake the tremor. The fear was real. Not fear of dying, but fear of failing. I was so close. I picked up the pen Miller offered. It was a heavy black ballpoint. I looked at the signature line. Henry J. Mitchell. Jason leaned down, his breath smelling of mints and stale alcohol. "Right there, Dad. Just sign it and we are free." Megan moved closer. Her hand came to rest on my shoulder. It looked like a gesture of comfort to the notary and Miller, but her thumb found the pressure point between my neck and my collarbone. She dug her manicured nail into the soft flesh. It was a sharp, stinging pain. "Do not hesitate, Hank," she whispered, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Sign the paper, or you will need that insulin sooner than you think." I winced, letting the pen hover over the paper. The pain in my shoulder was sharp, but it focused me. I looked at the document. I looked at Miller, who was watching me with an intensity that bordered on glaring. He was waiting for the signal. He was waiting for me to make the move. I touched the tip of the pen to the paper. A tiny dot of ink appeared. Jason exhaled a breath he must have been holding for minutes. But then I stopped. I lifted the pen. I cannot read this," I said, my voice cracking. "What do you mean you cannot read it?" Jason snapped. "You have your glasses on." I squinted, blinking rapidly. "No, these are my distance glasses. The prescription is old, the letters are swimming. I need my reading glasses, the ones with the brown frames." Megan's grip on my shoulder tightened until I thought she would draw blood. "Just sign it, Hank," she hissed. "You know what it says. It says you are selling the house. I cannot sign what I cannot read." I cried out, letting a note of hysterical panic enter my voice. Elizabeth always said, "Never sign what you cannot read. I need my glasses. They are on my nightstand." I dropped the pen. It rolled across the document. Jason let out a groan of frustration that sounded like a wounded animal. "Jesus Christ, Dad. You are unbelievable." "Go get them," Megan barked at him. "Go get the damn glasses so we can finish this." Jason glared at me, his hands balling into fists. "Fine. Do not move. Do not touch anything." He turned and stomped out of the room. I heard his heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. "Now." It was now or never. I watched him disappear into the hallway. I waited for the sound of his footsteps on the landing. 1, 2, 3. I turned to Miller. My demeanor changed instantly. The shaking stopped. The confusion vanished. I sat up straight, pushing Megan's hand off my shoulder with a force that made her stumble back in surprise. "Miller," I said, my voice clear and commanding. "The Bluebird has landed." Miller nodded once. He reached into his briefcase, but he didn't pull out another document. He pulled out a sleek silver badge and placed it on the table with a heavy metallic clunk. "Detective Miller, Chicago Police Department," he announced, his voice filling the room. Megan froze. Her eyes went wide, staring at the badge. What is this? Who are you?" She looked at me, and for the first time she saw the man I really was. Not the senile old fool she had tormented, but the man who had outsmarted her. I reached behind my back and ripped the tape holding the recorder. I pulled it out and slammed it onto the table next to the badge. "I am the man who is going to put you in a cage, Megan," I said. Megan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked at the stairs where Jason was still rummaging for glasses that didn't exist. She looked at the door. She looked at the notary, who had pulled a pair of handcuffs from his bag. "Jason," she screamed, her voice shrill and terrified. "Jason, run!" But it was too late. I could already hear the sirens wailing in the distance, getting louder with every second. The trap had snapped shut. The heavy thud of Jason's footsteps on the stairs sounded like the drumbeat of a condemned man walking to the gallows, though he did not know it yet. I stood by the dining table, my hand resting on the cool surface of the Sony recorder that was now the centerpiece of his destruction. Miller stood to my right, his badge gleaming under the chandelier light, a silent sentinel of justice. The notary, who was actually Officer Martinez, had shifted his stance, no longer the timid clerk, but a coiled spring ready to snap. Megan was frozen near the window, her face a mask of dawning horror, as she realized the trap had not just sprung, but had shattered her leg. "I found them, Dad!" Jason shouted from the hallway, his voice dripping with irritation. "They were in the bathroom drawer, not the nightstand. You really are losing your mind, old man." He strode into the room, holding a pair of cheap reading glasses triumphantly. He expected to see a defeated father ready to sign away his legacy. Instead, he walked into a courtroom. He stopped dead in the doorway. The glasses slipped from his fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a plastic clatter that echoed in the sudden silence. He looked at Miller. He looked at the badge. Then his eyes drifted to the table. I had not just placed the recorder there. While he was upstairs, I had reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope of photos, the ones I had risked my life to keep safe on the ledge outside my window. I had fanned them out across the deed of sale like a royal flush in a high-stakes poker game. There was the picture of him swapping the pills. There was the picture of Megan forcing the water down Elizabeth's throat. There was the close-up of the watch on Megan's wrist. And right in the center was Elizabeth's handwritten note. "Watch the tea." Jason's face turned the color of old ash. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogance, the bluster, the drunken confidence of the night before evaporated instantly, leaving behind a terrified child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, only this jar was filled with poison. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Dad." "What did you do?" "I did what I had to do," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I did what you were too weak to do. I told the truth." Megan reacted first. The survival instinct that made her dangerous also made her reckless. She let out a shriek that sounded more animal than human. It was a primal sound of rage and panic. "He is lying!" she screamed, launching herself across the room. "These are fake. He photoshopped them. Get rid of them, Jason." She lunged for the table, her hands clawed, ready to tear the photos into confetti. She moved with a speed I had not anticipated, her nails aiming for the evidence that would send her to death row. but she never reached the table. Officer Martinez, the young man Jason had dismissed as a nobody, moved faster. He stepped in front of me, blocking Megan's path. He didn't pull a pen. He pulled a Glock 19 from his shoulder holster. "Sit down," he roared, his voice commanding the room. "Police, get on the ground, now!" Megan skidded to a halt, her chest heaving. She looked at the gun, then at Jason, then at the back door. She was calculating the odds. "Do not even think about it," Miller warned, stepping forward, his hand on his own weapon. "The house is surrounded. There is nowhere to go, Megan. It is over." Jason backed away until he hit the wall. He was shaking his hands, trembling so violently he looked like he was having a seizure. "This is a mistake," he stammered, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't do anything. It was her. It was all her idea. She is the nurse. She gave the meds. I just wanted the money. I didn't kill anyone." Megan spun around, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You coward," she spat. "You spineless little worm. You were the one who bought the pills. You were the one who researched the dosage. Do not try to pin this on me." I watched them turn on each other. It was pathetic. It was disgusting. And it was exactly what I expected. They were not partners. They were just two parasites feeding on the same host, and now that the host was fighting back, they were eating each other. Quiet Miller shouted, "Both of you." I looked at Jason. He was sobbing now, sliding down the wall. "Dad, please tell them. Tell them I loved Mom. Tell them I would never hurt her. You know me, Dad. I am your son." I looked at him and I felt a hole open up in my chest. I wanted to believe him. Every instinct of a father wanted to run to him, to hug him, to tell him it would be okay. But then I remembered the tea. I remembered the conversation last night. I remembered the smell of bitter almonds. I reached out and pressed the play button on the recorder. The audio was grainy, accompanied by the static hiss of the fabric from my pocket. But the voices were crystal clear. It played loud in the silent room, bouncing off the walls of the house they had tried to steal. "She didn't suffer," Jason's recorded voice said, slurred and arrogant. "She didn't even wake up. She went to sleep and she just drifted away. It was a mercy." Then my voice asking, "How can you be sure?" And then the nail in the coffin. "Because we made sure we gave her a cocktail that sent her straight to the angels." Jason closed his eyes as his own voice condemned him. He curled into a ball, covering his ears as if he could block out the truth. But the recording continued. It played Megan's cruel laughter. It played Jason's admission about the insurance money. It played until the tape clicked off, leaving a silence that was heavier than the grave. Miller looked at Jason with pure disgust. "Jason Mitchell, you are under arrest for the murder of Elizabeth Mitchell and the attempted murder of Henry Mitchell." Martinez moved to cuff Megan. She fought, kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing Jason's name, cursing the world. But the steel cuffs clicked shut, silencing her physical resistance, even if her mouth kept running. Jason, however, did not go quietly. As Miller approached him, something snapped in my son's eyes. It was the desperation of a trapped rat. He saw the open door to the kitchen. He saw a sliver of daylight. "I am not going to prison," he screamed. He shoved Miller hard, catching the older detective off balance. Miller stumbled back, knocking into the table. Jason scrambled up and bolted for the kitchen. "Jason, stop!" Miller yelled, raising his weapon, but hesitating to fire with me in the line of sight. I stood there watching him run. I didn't move. I didn't try to stop him. I knew what was waiting for him. Jason burst through the kitchen door and flung the back door open. He sprinted out onto the patio, running toward the back gate, thinking he could disappear into the woods behind the property. But the gate opened before he reached it. A figure stepped out, blocking the path. It was a man in a blue uniform, holding a can of pepper spray in one hand and a heavy mail satchel in the other. "Going somewhere," Jason Tom growled. Jason skidded, trying to turn, but it was too late. Behind Tom, two uniformed officers emerged from the bushes, their guns drawn. To the left, 3 more officers appeared from the side of the house. Jason froze. He was surrounded. He looked at Tom, the mailman he had ignored and disrespected for years. The man he had dismissed as a nobody. Tom stepped forward and shoved Jason hard in the chest, sending him stumbling back onto the grass. "That is for the hedges," he said. Officers swarmed Jason. I watched through the bay window as they forced him to the ground. I watched them pull his arms behind his back. I watched the handcuffs gleam in the winter sun. I walked out the back door leaning on my cane. Miller followed me. We stood on the patio watching them haul my son to his feet. He was crying, sobbing like a baby, calling for me. "Dad, help me," he wailed. "Do not let them take me." "Dad," I walked down the steps. I walked across the frozen grass until I was standing right in front of him. The officers held him back, but I signaled them to wait. I looked into his eyes. I searched for the little boy I used to take fishing. I searched for the teenager I taught to drive. I searched for the young man I was so proud of at his graduation. But they were all gone. All I saw was a stranger with greed in his soul and my wife's blood on his hands. "Jason," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of a lifetime. "I gave you everything. I gave you a home. I gave you an education. I gave you my love." He sniffled, looking at me with pleading eyes. "I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry." I shook my head. "You are not sorry you killed her. You are sorry you got caught." I stepped closer, leaning in so only he could hear me. "I taught you how to walk," I whispered. "I taught you how to speak. I taught you how to tie your tie and how to shake a man's hand." I paused, letting the tears finally fall from my own eyes, not for him, but for the loss of him. "But I forgot the most important lesson, Jason. I forgot to teach you how to be a human being. And that is a failure I will have to live with for the rest of my life. But you will have to live with the consequences." I turned my back on him. "Dad, wait!" Jason screamed. "Dad, look at me." I didn't look back. I walked toward the house where Miller was waiting. I walked away from my son and toward the only thing I had left, justice. "Take him away, Miller," I said as I reached the patio. "I am done with him." As they dragged him to the squad car, his screams faded into the cold air. I stood on the porch taking a deep breath. The air smelled of winter and exhaust fumes, but underneath that, it smelled of something else. It smelled of freedom. The nightmare was over. The waking up was just beginning. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers strobed against the snow, creating a dizzying kaleidoscope of color on the white lawn. I stood at the window watching the finale of a tragedy I had never wanted to write. They brought Megan out first. She had lost all her composure. The Ice Queen facade had shattered, leaving behind a screaming banshee. She was thrashing against the officers, yelling at the top of her lungs that she was innocent, that she was just a nurse doing her job, that my son had forced her into it. Her voice was shrill and desperate, piercing the cold night air like a shard of glass. I watched Mrs. Higgins from next door, standing on her porch, with her hand over her mouth. She had believed Megan's lies about my dementia just yesterday, and now she was watching the neighborhood saint being shoved into the back of a squad car. Then they brought Jason. He was different. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't screaming. He walked with his head hung low, his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of his sins had finally crushed his spine. He looked smaller somehow. The arrogance was gone. The greed was gone. All that was left was a broken man who had gambled his soul and lost. As they guided him toward the car, he stopped for a split second and looked up at the window. He couldn't see me through the glare of the lights, but he knew I was there. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt a hollow, aching silence in the center of my chest, where my heart used to be. I watched my only child disappear into the darkness of the police vehicle, and I knew that the next time I saw him, it would be through a sheet of reinforced glass. Miller walked back into the house. The adrenaline was fading from his face, replaced by the weary look of a man who has seen too much of the dark side of human nature. "We got the physical evidence, Henry," he said softly. "The insulin vials, the forged documents on the laptop, the recording. It is watertight. They are not walking away from this." I nodded slowly, leaning heavily on the table. "Thank you, Miller. I could not have done it without you." He put a hand on my shoulder. "What will you do now?" I looked around the room. I looked at the spot on the rug where the tea had spilled. I looked at the empty chair where Elizabeth used to sit. This house was a museum of memories, but now it was also a crime scene. Every corner held a shadow. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like betrayal. "I am done here," I said. "I am selling it. Tomorrow. I am taking the cash offer from Thorne. I do not care if it is low. I just want out." Miller nodded, understanding. "And Jason, he will need a lawyer." I walked to the window and pulled the curtains shut, blocking out the flashing lights. "The state will provide him with one," I said. "I am done cleaning up his messes." But that wasn't entirely true. In the weeks that followed, I did one last thing for my son. I sold the house within 48 hours. I took a portion of the money, and I anonymously paid off the loan sharks he owed. I didn't do it to save him. He was safe enough in jail. I did it because I didn't want his debts following me. I didn't want his mistakes to be the last thing people remembered about the Mitchell name. I cleared the ledger. It was a final act of paternal duty, closing the book on his life before I started my own. I packed only what fit in my car. Elizabeth's photos, her jewelry box, my old investigation kit. The rest I left. The furniture, the clothes, the china they had eaten off of the night they confessed to murder, I left it all for the estate liquidators. I didn't want any object that they had touched. I wanted a clean break. A tabula rasa. The day I drove out of Chicago, the sky was a bruised purple. I didn't look back at the skyline. I kept my eyes on the road heading south, driving toward the warmth, driving away from the ghosts. I drove until the snow turned to rain, and the rain turned to sunshine. I drove until the air smelled of salt instead of exhaust. 6 months later, the view from my balcony is very different. The ocean is a sheet of turquoise glass stretching out to the horizon. The air is humid and smells of jasmine and salt spray. I am sitting in a wicker chair holding a cup of tea. Earl Grey. Hot. And I made it myself. I drink it without fear. I drink it with gratitude. I put the cup down and pick up the package that arrived this morning. It is postmarked from Chicago. The return address is Benny's darkroom. I smile. Benny and I talk on the phone once a week. He is thinking of retiring, moving down here too. He says the chemicals are bad for his lungs, but I think he just misses his friend. I open the envelope. Inside is a stack of photos. But these aren't grainy images of betrayal. They are bright, vibrant photos of my new life. There is one of me at the community center playing chess with a retired admiral named Frank. We are both laughing. There is one of me walking along the shoreline at sunrise looking at peace. And there is a letter. Dear Henry, it reads in Benny's scrawling handwriting. I developed these from the disposable you sent. You look good, my friend. You look like a man who has finally put down a heavy load. By the way, Miller says hello. The trial is set for next month. The prosecutor says it is an open and shut case thanks to you. You do not have to come back if you do not want to. You can testify via video link. Stay in the sun, Henry. You earned it. I look at the photo of myself. The man in the picture looks 10 years younger than the man who walked into the photo shop that snowy afternoon. His eyes are clear. His back is straight. He looks happy. I lean back in my chair, closing my eyes and listening to the rhythm of the waves. It is a lonely life sometimes. I miss Elizabeth every single day. I speak to her when I walk on the beach. I tell her about the birds I see. I tell her about the books I am reading. And sometimes I tell her I am sorry. Sorry that I couldn't protect her. Sorry that the fruit of our love turned out to be poison. But I also tell her that I survived. I survived the betrayal that should have killed me. I survived the grief that should have drowned me. And I learned the hardest lesson a parent can ever learn. Maternal and paternal instinct tells us that blood is thicker than water. It tells us that family is a bond that can never be broken. But that is a lie. Blood is just biology. It is just DNA. It doesn't guarantee loyalty. It doesn't guarantee love. And it certainly doesn't guarantee safety. Family is not what you are born into. Family is what you choose. Family are the people who stand by you when the world is falling apart. Family is Benny, the recluse photographer, who risked his life to warn me. Family is Miller, the cop, who believed me when no one else would. Family is Tom, the mailman, who delivered a message that saved my life. I picked the wrong family once. I let blind loyalty blind me to the truth. But I fixed it. I cut the rot out before it could kill the host. And now I have a second chance. I pick up my tea again and take a long, slow sip. It tastes sweet. It tastes like life. I look directly at you now, the person listening to this story. Maybe you are sitting in a house that feels like a prison. Maybe you are making excuses for someone who hurts you because you share a last name. Maybe you are afraid to speak up because you think you are weak or old or powerless. Look at me. I was 78 years old. I was alone. I was drugged. I was outnumbered. And I won. You can win too. But you have to be willing to see the truth even when it breaks your heart. You have to be willing to walk away from the people who use you, even if they are your own flesh and blood. Because at the end of the day, you only have one life. Do not let them take it from you. Do not let them turn you into a victim. I am Henry Mitchell. I am a widower. I am a father without a son. But I am free. And the sun on my face feels warmer than it ever has before. If my story touched you, please share it. You never know who needs to hear that it is okay to choose yourself. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth and survival. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut ties with family to save yourself? I will be reading them from my balcony with a fresh cup of tea. Stay safe out there, and remember the only people who deserve a seat at your table are the ones who bring love, not poison.